welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we're going to be drawing a dodo bird. As always, I'm drawing it using a Wacom Intuos Pro tablet, and I'm drawing straight into Photoshop. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here is the dodo bird. The trick about doing a dodo bird is, obviously they're extinct, so I've looked at a lot of pictures of their skeletons and a lot of the artist renderings from when they were still alive, and done my best to kind of recreate what I think they look like, or as close as I can get, including the coloration is iffy, especially in the beak. I'm not 100% certain yet what color I'm going to do the beak, so I'm still sort of working that out, but they're described as having brownish gray feathers, a gray face, and then their beak is described as being a pale yellow, a pale green, or black, or a combination of the three. So we're gonna get started with the brownish gray feathers. So I've picked kind of a brown that's desaturated to make it a little bit more gray, but still has some coloration to it. And we're just gonna follow the feathers up. We don't know much about the bird's feather length, don't know any of that. From artist renderings, I'm inclined to think they might be a little longer, but it depends on which one you look at, because sometimes they make it seem like they're short. They're not actually certain if some of the artists at the time even were sketching the right bird. So it's a little bit of a trick. We'll see how it goes, but hopefully it will turn out well, and we can give these little guys some representation. Like always, building feathers like fur, always doing a stroke, a stroke, and then one in between, following the contour of the head, right? So it's not one big line. I'm always mindful of staggering the strokes. And especially on birds, certainly that's true with the dodo as well. There's no need to keep this back edge straight. Likely wouldn't be, especially with feathers that are likely coming off a bit, and being sort of ruffled back. So no need to make sure that's a perfectly straight edge. Beak's a different story. When we get to the beak, we'll have to make sure as best as possible, and it doesn't have to be perfect. But I'll try as much as I can to keep the beak a little bit more straight and in line with the edge. Feathers, don't need to worry about it. Their face, I should also mention, their face doesn't have feathers, it's just skin. So the only section with feathers is really, back and down into the neck, and then of course their bodies, but since I typically do portraits, I haven't drawn the full body of the dodo bird. So now I'm presuming with the skin that the skin is going to be similar to the way that a lot of bird skin is, and that's going to be textured. And so when I'm creating texture, I typically, do some ups and downs, sort of wobble the lines and keep them nice and short, and that creates kind of this textured effect. So we'll just keep doing that. Still kind of following the contour of a head, but doing it in a way that creates texture. Alright, so I'm going to have the light source coming from above and above and to the left. Whew, words just sort of failed there. As always, that means it's coming from above and in front of, not behind or next to you. Now all edges are in shadow, that's why I'm backing off my pin pressure here, right along this edge. Even though it's on the side of the light source. That would change depending on exactly where the light source was. If it were next to, instead of above and in front of, then yes, the edge would be in highlight, but then a lot of the rest of the figure would be in shadow. So the best possible way to highlight a subject's face is typically going to be to have the light source coming from above and in front of it. And of course the back is going to have a much bigger, deeper shadow. It's just that even on this front side, you know, the figure's rounding away. Now some of the shadowing under here is where his beak is casting the shadow. Otherwise, more of this would be in highlight. I'm going to reach into some of the shadowing I put to sort of feather it in, but I was giving myself enough room to be able to feather that nicely. So I sort of added shadows in a bigger area than I needed to. So right, I know I mentioned that the, under the beak's going to have a shadow, but inevitably that shadow is going to be kind of going off of the edge of the bird, right? With the light source coming from above and in front of, it's not next to, so that shadow is inevitably going to adjust the further down it gets from the beak. So as we come down in here, you have the highlight that's kicking all the way, almost all the way over, except all edges are in shadow. So now we're going to get the face. And I put some thought into the beak. I think I'm going to have the blue extend on the top part of the beak. It's hard to see. Everybody has drawn a dodo differently, so when you're looking at old examples, it's hard to get a feel for exactly what color they were and where color shifted. So I'm going to leave the top beak the same as this skin, this kind of grayish color. And then I'll have the green underneath kicking into the black here with the sort of pale yellow. And we'll see how that goes. Trying to be as accurate as possible, but it's hard when there's no good description of exactly what a dodo looked like. Now, again, I mentioned this before, when I'm doing creating texture, I'll often put full pin pressure going up and then down, up, down, right? Like I'm changing that direction, and that creates a look of texture. I'm assuming the dodo would have a similar texture to other birds, where typically their skin's a little bit more wrinkly, which is why I'm doing this. Now on this edge, right, from the light source, there's going to be just a little bit of shadowing. Still going to build in the texture, and then when it comes underneath, light's kicking in over here, you would have a highlight against the eye on this side. Potentially some shadowing under the feathers. I'm going to assume there is. Would make sense. The benefit of doing a lot of drawings is you get used to some rules that are constantly there, and even if they don't follow for all species, when you're drawing one that doesn't have a lot of information about it, you can kind of sometimes pull from what typically happens in nature to make some inferences on how you think something might have looked. All right, now the beak, I'm going to go ahead and put on a different layer, but unlike the skin, right, we need to be a bit more careful, unlike the skin and the feathers, to make sure that we're staying within the lines here. Or at least doing our best to kind of keep it straight. And of course this is down by the mouth, so this would be in shadow before it turns into black right around here. And then of course it would be kicking back into highlight, but I need to give it enough room so that the shadow really has a chance to be shadow-like. And then also, you know, all edges are in shadow, so this upper edge here would also have that shadowing. Now, it also has, at least I think, of course we don't know, nostrils down here, but I think there's a bulge. You can see it in the skull. There's a recess here. And a lot of artists at the time seem to depict a little bulge spot. So that would have some shadowing as well, right underneath where the bulge would be. All right, now just like the eye, right, considering the light source, you know, we have his little nostril coming here. Side on the light source as it rounds into the cavity, likely going into shadow. Opposite side, maybe not. That's probably kicking into a bit of highlight, so I'm just gonna push this highlight all the way over. And then potentially underneath catching some. The deeper the shadow, the bigger this bulge will be, so I'm going to temper out this shadow just a little bit to decrease how much it's bulging out. I don't know that it would be quite this much. Yeah, there we go. A little bulge, but nothing crazy. And then I'm just going to feather in this transition as it's going from highlight into shadow where his mouth is. Make that a little bit gentler. Wouldn't be a harsh transition, it would be a subtle one. There are depictions of these bulges in the cheek. I am going to go ahead and do one in the blue, in the cheek, in the beak. I don't know if that's what I said. I'm going to do one in the blue and then one in the yellow. I just was debating on what colors I should do what based on what I've researched, but we're going to do this one as the grayish bluish kind of color. Doing it all in shadow first to make sure I have it kind of lined up the way I want it. Not a lot of space to work with, certainly a little bit. And then to temper off the lines, right, like this is a pretty dramatic shadow here. I'm just gonna feather that in. And that should temper off how dramatic that changeover looks. It'll still be there, but it won't be nearly as harsh. I'm gonna go to this pale green color, just deciding on if this is pale enough or if I should pop it up into the same region the blue was, which was right here. For the most part, this is going to be in shadow underneath. There is likely going to be some highlight kicking in right after the beak comes out of the mouth, right? You have the lower jaw, I guess, in effect. There'll be some highlighting as it comes out from there, and then it'll go quickly back into shadow. And then like the blue, it'll be running into black. I'm highlighting through here. This is where that beak is coming back out. And then I'm doing the same with the yellow. Any one of these colors I might change if I decide it's not quite looking right. It certainly seems pretty colorful, so I don't know that this is correct, but you know, nobody really knows that, so. Alright, and the final coloration is black. That's always a trickier one because I try to hold back my pin pressure. Luckily, for the most part, the black is going to be in shadow. You know, you have a little burst maybe here before it goes into shadow here, and there's gonna be some highlighting as it transitions into shadow up here. For the most part, all of the black will be in shadow. That'll make it a little easier. But for making gray black, you know, I'm just holding back my pin pressure. And then fill in the highlight, or the highlights after I fill in the whole thing as a shadow. I may still mix it up. It seems like such a harsh line here. I may mix some of the yellow down into his beak. We'll see. Don't want it to look out of place. Probably means it's wrong. So to add the highlight here, I'm not really putting full pin pressure. I'm just adding more lines. So sort of an easy way, especially in an area where you've kind of already done shadowing. Easy way to add highlights into a shadowed spot is to just, you know, add more lines in, make it a nice transition. Same thing for above. Alright, so I am gonna shift this yellow a bit. It's almost too perfect through here, so we're just gonna change it up a bit. Yeah, I think that looks better. And the last thing to do is the eyes. Most animals' eyes are brown. Where I'm torn is that a lot of artists seem to be depicting them relatively lightly from the time period, whereas some also depicted them as dark. So I'm imagining it's going to be like a light brown. In some cases, the artists from the time period that did depict a dodo bird, their eyes looked almost gray or blue. And again, in other cases, brown. And I don't know exactly why that is a difference, but we'll do it as light brown and go from there. It's a really bad circle. That's why I draw this way, is because I know I draw horribly. Can't keep my lines straight, so I make sketchy lines. So we're going to go all the way around, which is what I typically do with birds, right? Like bring the lines all the way around the eye, and then we'll significantly shadow the top section. Alright, and then I'm going to take the select tool to make it straight, since it is currently not. Now, light source is coming from above and to the left. So, we're going to have a burst of light against the pupil on the opposite side. And then we'll just fill in the highlights on the side of the light source, allowing this section to go a little bit into shadow. And then the edge would also go into shadow. Start creating a shadow after you round underneath, so I'm starting the eye to go into shadow over here. The shadow on this side won't be nearly extreme as the shadow that will be above the eye, but it will still be less bright than the side of the eye on the side of the highlight of the light source. And now one of the most important things to do is to add a light flare. So I've already selected white. It's always going to be on the side of the light source and within the highlighted section of the eye, and then we're just going to fill it with the foreground color. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so that is how you draw a dodo bird. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me, I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.